The night was quiet, save for the occasional rush of wind that stirred the litter along the deserted city streets. A lone street lamp cast a pool of dim yellow light around an ATM on a poorly lit corner of the neighborhood, its flickering screen illuminating patches of the cracked sidewalk. It was here that John Harper, a 68-year-old retired Special Forces veteran, approached to withdraw his monthly pension. A routine that never felt quite routine given his instincts honed in far more dangerous environments. John walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from a long-ago mission that had gone sideways in a way only war can dictate. His hair was more salt than pepper now, and his face carried lines deepened not just by age but by years of stress and responsibility that few could truly understand. Despite his seemingly frail appearance, his eyes remained sharp, scanning the dark corners and empty spaces that most would overlook. His demeanor was calm, collected, a stark contrast to the nervous energy of the city around him. Meanwhile, lurking in the shadows across the street, a trio of young men watched John with predatory interest. Dressed in hoodies and baggy jeans, they whispered among themselves, pointing at the old man and snickering. To them, he was the perfect mark, old, alone, and seemingly unaware of the danger he was about to face. "Look at this one, boys. Bet he's got a whole month's worth of pension in that wallet, just waiting for us," muttered the leader of the group, a lanky youth with a jagged scar running down his cheek. His name was Danny, known in the neighborhood for small-time scams and petty thefts. Flanking him were his loyal sidekicks, Mike and Tom, equally eager to prove themselves in the petty criminal hierarchy of the urban jungle. The plan was simple. Approach the old man under the guise of asking for directions or the time, then snatch his wallet when he was distracted. Confidence bolstered by their previous successes, they sauntered across the street, their steps synchronized with the misguided bravado that youth and ignorance often bring. As John entered his PIN and waited for the ATM to process his transaction, he felt the unmistakable shift in the atmosphere, the electric charge of impending confrontation. He didn't need to look up to know he was no longer alone. His years of training had sharpened his senses to detect even the slightest change in his environment. "Hey, old man, got the time?" Danny called out, his voice dripping with feigned innocence as they approached. John turned slowly, his face betraying none of the awareness that coursed through his veins. He sized up the young men with a veteran's eye, quickly assessing their posture, their hands, their eyes. Each detail painted a clearer picture of their intentions. "It's late enough for you boys to be home," John replied, his voice steady and firm, masking the strategic calculations unfolding in his mind. The thugs shared a look, surprised by John's calm demeanor, but not deterred in their mission. As Danny laughed and stepped closer, reaching out as if to grab John's shoulder, the air tensed like the calm before a storm. In that heartbeat of silence, John's decision was made. Years of combat had ingrained in him a response as natural as breathing: defend, neutralize, secure. But tonight, the stakes were different. Tonight, he fought not for country or comrades, but for his own dignity and safety. The streetlight flickered above as Danny's hand descended towards John's shoulder, not knowing that he was about to encounter a man who had faced death more times than he'd dared count. The night, once silent, was about to echo with the sounds of a lesson these young men would not soon forget. As Danny's hand reached out to clasp John's shoulder, the air seemed to thicken, charged with an imminent threat. But before his fingers could make contact, John acted with the kind of swiftness that belied his age and physical appearance. He stepped to the side, his movement a blur of precision and control, and grabbed Danny's wrist, twisting it just enough to send a clear message without causing real damage. "You really don't want to do this," John said, his voice low and dangerous, a stark contrast to the calm demeanor he had exhibited moments earlier. Danny winced, the pain surprising him more than the speed of the old man's reaction. He tried to pull away, but John's grip was ironclad, honed by years of subduing enemies in environments far more hostile than this urban street corner. Mike and Tom, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected resistance, quickly moved to support their leader. But as they advanced, John released Danny and faced the new threats head-on. His stance was wide and balanced, a fundamental posture that spoke of countless hours of training and combat. "Back off now," John warned, his eyes scanning the two youths as they hesitated, their confidence shaken by the display of skill from an unexpected quarter. Instead of heeding the warning, spurred on by a mix of pride and adrenaline, Mike lunged forward, aiming a clumsy punch at John's head. With minimal effort, John ducked under the swing, stepping behind Mike and gently pushing him forward, using his own momentum to send him stumbling into Tom. The two thugs collided and fell to the ground in a tangle of limbs, their coordination as lacking as their judgment. The brief skirmish had drawn the attention of a few late-night passers-by, who now watched from a safe distance, their mobile phones out, capturing the unfolding drama. John stood over the fallen youths, his breathing as even as if he had been doing nothing more strenuous than a stroll through the park. "Get up and get out of here," John commanded, his tone now more of a directive than a suggestion. He helped Mike and Tom to their feet, not out of kindness, but to expedite their departure. Danny, recovering from the initial shock and now nursing a bruised ego along with a twisted wrist, glared at John, but followed the cue of his cohorts. The trio, defeated and demoralized, quickly retreated, leaving behind a trail of muttered curses and wounded pride. As they disappeared into the night, John turned to acknowledge the onlookers, giving them a brief nod to signal that the danger had passed. He then returned to the ATM, retrieved his card and cash, and finished his transaction as if the interruption had been nothing more than a slight inconvenience. Walking away from the ATM, John felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he had been able to defend himself without escalating the violence, and sadness for the necessity of the confrontation. Every encounter like this brought back memories of battles long past, of friends lost and enemies made. The quiet of the night now seemed louder to him, each step echoing with the weight of his past. As he made his way home, John's thoughts were not of triumph, but of a deep, pervasive weariness. He was tired of fighting, tired of being on guard, tired of the world that seemed to demand the skills he wished he could forget. Tonight was another reminder that while he could leave the battlefield would never quite leave him. After the confrontation, John continued his walk home, the crisp night air doing little to cool the heat of adrenaline still coursing through his veins. His mind replayed the encounter, not with a sense of pride, but with a profound introspection that had become all too familiar. Each physical engagement, no matter how minor, dredged up memories from his past, memories of a time when actions had life or death consequences, and the enemy was more than just misguided youths. As he walked, John's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps hurrying to catch up to him. He tensed, ready to defend himself again, but as he turned, he saw a young woman from the group of onlookers. She approached him with a cautious but determined stride. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her breath visible in the cold night air. "I was at the ATM earlier. I saw everything. You were amazing, but I could tell you didn't want to do that." John relaxed slightly, offering a small, weary smile. "Nobody really wants to, not deep down," he replied, his voice carrying a hint of sadness. "But thank you for saying that. It means a lot." The woman nodded, hesitating for a moment before continuing. "My brother, he's been down some rough paths. Reminds me of those guys tonight. I always wonder if someone could have shown him a different way, you know?" John listened, his expression softening. Sometimes, all it takes is someone to stand up, show them there are consequences to their choices. Maybe tonight was that night for them. They spoke for a few more minutes, the woman expressing her gratitude, and John offering a few words of hope and encouragement. As they parted ways, the weight of their conversation added a new layer to John's reflections. Reaching his home, John stood for a moment at the door, looking back at the street that had become quieter now. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a deep fatigue that seemed to settle in his bones. He knew that despite his desire to leave his past behind, tonight was a stark reminder that he would always possess skills that set him apart from ordinary civilians. As he stepped inside, the warmth of his house enveloping him, John paused by the hallway mirror. He looked at his reflection, seeing beyond the aging face and tired eyes to the young soldier he once was. He sighed deeply, a sound more of resignation than relief. "I'm too old for this," he murmured to his reflection. But a part of him knew that the soldier inside him would never fully retire, always alert, always ready to defend, always bearing the burden of his training. He turned away from the mirror, ready to try and find some rest, though he knew sleep would be elusive. As he climbed the stairs to his bedroom, he wished for a night free of dreams, free of conflict. But deep down, John understood that his battles were never just on the streets. They were in the shadows of his mind, ever present, ever challenging. The night closed in around his house, silent and watchful. But inside, John Harper was already preparing for the next day, for the next challenge, because for men like him, peace was more of a concept than a reality.